morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for the community budget meeting as we prepare for the fiscal year 2020-21 budget cycle. We'll also be looking at the current fiscal year's budget due to the COVID-19 situation and the impending economic downturn. We have a presentation for you this morning, and following that, we'll go into a question and answer session. So for those who aren't familiar with me, I am Markeisha Guillory. I'm the budget administrator. I'm also joined here with the budget team for Nessia Ward, Bertram Jones, the accounting manager / revenue manager, Antonio Benuelos. We also have other city staff that have joined this meeting. And we have some directors here, including Sal Vaca, who oversees library and community services. And they're all here to answer any questions that you may have and any comments. So please note that this meeting is being recorded. If you have a question, once we get through the presentation, you can use the raise hand feature to pose your question or comment, and then you'll have 1 minute for that, just to be respectful of everyone's time and to give attendees a chance to engage with us. And we'll try to answer your questions as best as possible. For those that we cannot answer right now, we will get back to you within 3 business days. And then ultimately, after both meetings conclude, we will put together a question and answer document and post it on the city's website. So with that being said, I'm going to go into the presentation. So for today's agenda for the presentation, we're going to have an overview of the budget. We're going to discuss how the city generates its revenue sources, how it spends its revenues. We're going to look at the current status of the budget for both fiscal year 2019-20 and 2021. We'll talk about the next steps in the budget process, and then we'll go into the question and answer session. So first, we wanted to provide an organizational structure overview. Recently, the city was restructured back in January, I believe, and a number of departments were consolidated. This was an opportunity to increase our effectiveness and our efficiency by condensing the number of departments and putting together those functions that are correlated. As we can see here, we added a few areas too. We have the internal services on the far right, which consolidates the finance, human resources, and several other functions. And the main reason for that was to bridge the gap, especially between the finance and human resources department, to work more closely together. And then over on the far left, we have the economic development department, which also has units that were in other departments. So for instance, the arts and culture division was previously under the library. That has now been moved over to the economic development department. Also, the housing programs for the Richmond Housing Authority is also included under that area. And then we have the health initiatives and overall property management. And again, this was done mostly to condense the city's org structure into so that we could provide more efficient services to the community. As we develop the budget, we keep the city council strategic priorities in mind. As we work on not only the budget and the numbers, but also looking at performance measurements and benchmarks to ensure that we are carrying out the duties and providing services that we exist to provide. And here are the 5 strategic priorities, which were revised a couple of years ago. We have 5 main areas: governance, finance, and leadership. That includes the finance department, the human resources, and more of our administrative departments and overall governance of the city, including the city manager. We have full service and safe communities, which is mostly the public safety areas, police and fire. Environment, health, equity, and sustainable communities includes our economic development. The residential and built environment includes planning and building and other housing programs. And then of course we have the economic development and education. So the purpose of the budget is it serves 4 main purposes. It is a policy document in that it sets the city council's policy for the fiscal year. It's a financial plan that sets our expected revenues and expenditures. It is an operations guide in that it maps out the services, programs that will be carried out for the fiscal year. And then of course, it's a communications device to provide all of this information to readers. We have a very wide audience of readers that includes the general public, the Richmond community and communities outside of our own, businesses, developers, rating agencies, bankers. It includes a multitude of different users who turn to our budget for financial information on the city. And so we strive to make sure that we are covering these areas as we put the budget document together. We also submit our budget document to 2 budget award programs, including the Government Finance Officers Association and including the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. And these awards basically validate that we are producing budget documents that cover or meet the objectives of those 4 items that we just discussed. And we do apply for these awards every year. We've received them consecutively for the last 9 years at this point, and we will continue to do so. We also use the feedback to enhance the budget document. Here's a snapshot of our annual budget cycle. It starts July 1 and ends June 30. July through December includes our year-end audit. When we go into December and January, we start our budget planning for the upcoming fiscal year. So we're setting the guidelines and preparing to communicate those guidelines to the departments. In February, we have our mid-year budget review and also our budget kickoff for the upcoming fiscal year. During the budget kickoff, we meet with all departments and we provide the budget guidelines. We also provide training and support as they develop their operational budgets and their capital improvement budgets as well. In February and March, we go into budget entry. This is where departments enter their budgets. And then we have budget hearings with each individual department to go through those budgets. We look at not only the numbers, but we're looking at their position control, their overall staffing levels and staffing structure. We look at any capital improvement projects that they're proposing or those that are existing and ongoing. We take a look at grants, and then we also look at performance measurements. During April and May, we prepare the draft budget, which is required to go to the City Council by the first Tuesday in May. And we also hold community budget meetings. We're a little bit later this year on the community budget meetings, but the goal is to have those during April and May to have more engagement with the community earlier in the process. And then June includes the budget refinement and ultimately budget adoption, which is the last Tuesday in June. As we go throughout the budget cycle, there is ongoing monitoring and reporting of the budget. We report to executive management on a monthly basis. There is a whole set of financial reports that are provided to executive management. And then on a quarterly basis, we report to the City Council with the status of the current year's budget. And then on July 1, we start the new fiscal year. So just to remind everyone about our budget goals for this coming fiscal year, we strive to put together a structurally balanced budget. We know that that's going to take a little bit of time in light of the economic downturn, mostly due to COVID-19. We do strive to preserve our services, although we know that there's going to have to be some reductions. We are working to preserve services to the extent possible. We are considering the impacts of COVID-19 on our services, both in the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. And again, we recognize that there has to be some reductions, but we are working to minimize the impacts to staff. And then lastly, we would like to work toward increasing our cash reserves to at least the policy level. And this is one of those areas where it is very important that we try to reach that level of, our level is 15%. 16% is ideal, as that covers about 2 months of expenditures. Right now we're at 11%, and that's just over 1 month's coverage. So we would like to work to get back to the policy level. Some of our financial highlights. Over the last 5 fiscal years, we've ended with surpluses in the general fund, meaning that revenue has exceeded expenditures. We've maintained our credit rating upgrade, which occurred after we had a downgrade. So we've been successful in maintaining that. And in order to do so, we've been able to do that with not only with the surpluses, but also reducing some of our negative funds, and then increasing our target level from 7% to 15% as far as the reserve policy. And as I mentioned, we decreased the total negative cash balances over the last 3 fiscal years. We still have some outstanding, but we've made good progress. And then we're updating our 5-year budget forecast, which allows us to proactively address any issues in future years so that we're not so reactive or having to make really severe cuts. We're updating that, and you did receive a preliminary overview of the 5-year forecast during the May 26th council meeting, and we'll receive another updated forecast after the budget is completed. Some of our challenges, the economic downturn, which a recession was already looming, and experts had advised that starting in calendar year 2021, agencies would start to feel the impact of that. However, it came a little bit sooner, mostly due to COVID-19. There are rising pension costs, especially in the PERS and other post-employment benefits. There's a number of unfunded maintenance and improvement projects that we just don't have the funding for at this time, but we continue to defer. The reserve policy is below the target, and then we still have outstanding negative fund balances that we need to cure. So we're going to provide an overview of the city's revenue and expenditures, and I'm going to turn it over to Antonio Banuelos.
Okay, thank you very much, Markeisha. So this whole pie is basically what we're expecting to receive for revenues in 1920, so about 176 million. 78% of that, of the city's general fund revenue, really comes from three main taxes: property taxes, utility users tax, and sales tax. I'll go into more detail on those top three revenue streams in the next few slides. The other 22% are made of various smaller revenue streams, such as hotel tax, franchise fees, transfer tax, rent, fees for services, grants, and operating transfers into the general fund. For the 1% property tax distribution. So property tax, of course, these are paid directly to the county and then remitted to the city. So when you pay your property tax bill, this is part of it. Not everything you pay to the county, though, actually comes back to the city. Of the 1% assessed valuation tax that you see on your property tax bill, only 28% of that comes back to the city of Richmond. The bulk goes to other agencies such as the school system. The city will receive about $44 million in property taxes in both current year and fiscal year 1920, and next year in fiscal year 2021. The forecast for next year takes into account the sales that occurred in 2019, the proposition mandated cap of 2% for most other properties, and assumes the Chevron refinery, valued at $3 billion last year, stays about the same. Now, if the county increases their valuation, that means more money for the city. If it lowers it, due to decreased value stemming from lower productivity or lower revenues tied to lower crude oil prices, then that means less property taxes for the city. We're currently not expecting any declines in 2021 tied directly to COVID-19 for property taxes. This could change if housing sales decline and prices actually drop down the road. A bigger concern, is the value of the Chevron refinery dropping due to lower production and lower crude oil prices. You usually get a report from the county telling you what's going to happen the first week of July. But this year, due to the shelter in place, that report will likely not be available until mid-August. For sales tax. Sales tax, of course, mostly paid directly by the consumer when they purchase certain products. Again, like property tax, not everything you pay in sales tax, though, actually comes back to the city of Richmond. The current sales tax rate in Richmond totals 9.25%. Of the 9.25%, 7.25% goes to the state, and the other 2% comes back to the city of Richmond. Again, the bulk goes to the state of California for different programs that they have. Before COVID-19, sales tax was our biggest revenue stream. We were originally expecting about $48 million. After COVID-19, we'll be closer to $41 million this year and probably next year too. Sales tax revenue stream is the revenue stream most affected by COVID-19. And the forecast for next year takes into account a low growth back to normal, whatever that new normal ends up being. It's a guess at this time. Some businesses are more affected than others and will take longer to come back. For utility user tax, this revenue is paid by different providers of different utilities. It is not collected by neither the county nor the state, like property tax or sales tax. In fiscal year 2019-20, we were expecting about $46 million from this revenue stream. It is collected by various cell phone and telephone companies, by Comcast and AT&T for cable, for example, by PG and MCE for gas and electricity. You'll see it on your various monthly bills. This is also paid directly by Chevron. They pay us for two things. One is for the tax settlement, and the other one is for what we call the max cap provision. The cap amount changes year to year based on a very specific CPI for the Bay Area, usually around 2%, and they will pay over $24 million in fiscal year 2021. No significant impact is expected from COVID-19 to the UUT. The majority of the accounts are paid by either essential businesses or residential accounts. The revenue as a whole is going down $3 million next year, but that is due to how the Chevron tax settlement payment was structured, due to the city receiving $7 million in current year, 1920, and only $4 million next year, 2021. And with that, we'll go back to Markeisha.
Thank you, Antonio. So this is a breakdown of how the city spends its revenues. This was the adopted mid-year budget, which was $176 million at that time. We are aware that this amount will be reduced for this year due to us certain revenue not materializing. So this is just an overall general breakdown. Salaries and wages account for about 74% of the budget. Utilities 3%, cost pool about 5%, and then operating transfers out, which includes mostly transfers to other programs and services, such as the Employment and Training Department. Hilltop and Marina Bay Landscape and Lighting Districts are also included in this category. The other two categories of other operating and professional services, those are areas that are discretionary to a certain extent at the department level. So departments generally come up with those budgets for those two areas. Everything else is pretty much non-discretionary. And so as we work through our budget reductions and looking at where we can find savings, we're looking at everything in totality, including the salaries and benefits categories. This is to also show how we spend the revenues by function. So as we can see from here, about 58% of the budget is spent on public safety, 15% public works, 7% is the library and community services departments, and then general government is about 20%. General government includes all the administrative departments that provide services to other city departments. Examples include the HR department, or human resources, finances, finance department, information technology, city council, city manager, and so on and so forth. These are, again, departments that provide services to other city departments, or what we call internal services. So we just wanted to provide an overview or 10-year summary of our staffing levels over the last 10 years. And as you can see, from fiscal year 10-11 through fiscal year 19-20, overall full-time equivalents or staffing level has dropped by almost 100 FTEs, both in the non-sworn and sworn categories. However, with that, we can see that although our staffing levels are pretty much stabilized, especially over the last 5 years, the growth rates of pension costs continue to far outweigh our growth in staff and also outweigh our growth in our major revenue sources. So we continue to face challenges with pension costs in addition to OPEB or other post-employment benefits. So this is just to provide that overview and comparison of growth rates. For the fiscal year 2021, before any reductions, if any reductions are made to staff, the staffing levels will remain at the same amount as fiscal year 2019-20 before any reductions are made. So here's a general overview of the status of the current budget and next year's budgets. As we can see at mid-year, we adopted a budget with a $192 surplus. In light of COVID-19 and the economic downturn, we are facing a deficit of $6.6 million in the current fiscal year. When we originally put together the projected budget for the fiscal year 2021, we were looking at 27.9 deficit. That has since increased to $29.5 million. And the increase is mostly due to us receiving additional information in the sales tax revenue. And with that, we made adjustments to the revenue budget of about $3.5 million. However, a portion of that was offset by some benefit savings in a few of the vacant positions. So we were able to capture some savings there on the vacancy side. And then we also had the increase or the decrease in sales tax revenue projections. We continue to refine our projections on both the revenue and expenditure side as we get new information. And so as we go through this process, those numbers are subject to be adjusted again. Here's also an overview of the current financial condition. As we can see, just overall in the general fund, while revenue has decreased or projected to decrease $12.6 million, expenditures are projected to increase by $16.9 million. So there's a significant imbalance there, or a significant gap that we really have to work to close. And we're going through the process of balancing the budget using a number of measures. So in light of the large deficit of $29.5 million that we're facing, a number of stakeholders came together to develop budget balancing strategies. Those stakeholders included an ad hoc budget committee that consists of the mayor and 2 council members, city staff, department directors, and also union representatives. And we met to go through or to come up with ideas for balancing the budget. So all strategies that were discussed during those conversations were listed as budget balancing strategies. We didn't leave anything off of the list. And then from there, we worked to categorize all of those into what we call buckets of options. As you can see here, we have the estimated cost savings on the low end and the high end for those buckets. And I'll just talk a little bit about what those mean. The general operating items are mostly those operating expenditures outside of impacts to staff or meet and confer items. So it's professional services, contracts, vacancies, and so on and so forth. The second bucket is the meet and confer items with unions for accommodations, and those include any furloughs or any salary cuts, any additional contributions to pensions or OPEB are all included in that category. And then we had a third category, which is items to consider after exhausting all others. One of the, or 2 of the main items in that category includes partial or full closure of libraries, and then also layoffs or staff reductions. And then the fourth category that we did not cost out at this time is just other items that were considered during brainstorming. We really wanted to keep the process very transparent and to also encourage people to continue to come up with ideas. And so that included everything else that's not included in the categories above. Some of those items may be moved up at some point because they can fall into one of the other categories, but at this point, those have not been included. So for the current fiscal year, we have presented a number of measures to begin balancing the budgets. For 2019-20, we presented the staff recommendations, the first round, that amounted to $3.9 million for the current fiscal year and $15.4 million in estimated savings for 2021. Those were presented at the last council meeting. Since then, we've identified additional vacancies for hiring freeze in the amount of $2.1 million. We also, departments came forward with additional reductions to their operating budgets and closely looking at those and scrutinizing to see if there's some room there. And then we also received an unanticipated large receipt in our documentary transfer tax in the current fiscal year. So as it stands, we're looking at about a $2 million deficit in the current year that we still need to work to reduce. And for 2021, we're at $11.7 million deficit or gap that we need to close. So we'll be working to put together 3 to 4 proposals that will be presented to the City Council that will include budget balancing strategies from all 3 of the categories discussed earlier. So some of our next steps includes getting approval for our staff's additional recommendations for balancing the budget. As I mentioned, we're going to present 3 to 4 budget balancing proposals they'll all include the 15 million that was presented last week, and then some additional areas will be included in there to balance it to zero. And then we're also working with Lift Up Richmond on the ballot measures that are going to go on the ballot in November. And then the goal is to have a balanced budget to be adopted on June 30. And here, this is a city council budget calendar just for the remainder of this budget process through June 30. It just kind of sums up what we plan to do each week. We'll be also refining this as we go along to make it a little bit more specific, but it just provides the general guidelines of where we're going in terms of the budget process. We've also listed here a number of resources where you can find the city's financial information. All of the presentations are online. All of our budget documents, including the operating budget, the mid-year budget, and also the capital improvement is included on the website. We also have our CAFR, or Comprehensive Financial Annual Report, the annual financial statements. Those are also on the website. And then we also encourage everyone to visit the Richmond Financial Transparency module. There is both historical and real-time financial data that pulls straight from our system. And you can go in there and play around with it and see where we are at any given point. As I understand, it's refreshed every week. So the information is up to date and current. And this presentation with those links will also be posted after the meeting. So that concludes our presentation. We will now open it up for the question and answer session. Before we do that, though, we're going to read the questions that we received before this meeting through the email, and we'll try to provide answers to those questions. Again, if there's anything we can't answer right now, we will take note of it and get back to you within 3 business days. And then ultimately, we'll put all of the questions and answers together in one document and publish those on the website. So just in the essence of time, if you do have a question or comment, please use the raise hand feature, and then you'll be limited to 1 minute, just to be respectful of everyone's time and to give multiple people a chance to ask questions or present their comments. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to budget analyst Vernesia Ward and Bertram Jones, who will read the comments or questions that we received via email. And then from there, we'll go into the live question and answer. Thank you.
Hi, this is Bertram Jones, and I'm going to read the first question. This is from Ian. How community centers and recreation programs will be affected as my business, IBX Fitness, operates out of the Booker T. Anderson Community Center, and I am worried I will be losing a physical location to hold my program. Sal, could you please answer this question?
Yes, good morning. Sal Vaca, Library and Community Services Director. The short answer is all community centers are being impacted at this point because they're closed. We don't have clear guidance from the county at this point as to when we're going to open those centers. When we do, we will follow the county's guidance, recognizing that we are in the process of making physical modifications to each facility to comply with social distancing requirements, with hygiene requirements. We do hope and anticipate that we'll get the green light sometime this summer, late this summer perhaps. And when we do, some of the programming will be phased in, but also recognize that initially less participants will be allowed to participate in those activities because of the social spacing requirements by the county. Hope that answered your question.
I guess I'll take that question. This is Vernesia Ward, City of Richmond Finance Department Budget Analyst. Question comes from Tom Richards. My primary concerns are that the parks and the plunge would pay additional, he said he would pay additional taxes to save these. I guess it's a comment. Bert?
Okay, next question or next comment from Marcella James. My comment is in regard to the Richmond Public Library. I have heard rumors that the city is planning to close the public library permanently. I want this rumor to be clarified. I also want the board members to understand the importance of public library are for the community and their residents' social mental health. Richmond Public Library have not brought books to our community, but have also brought resources, tutoring for adults and children, and social groups that continue to Richmond social mental health for their residents.
And good morning, this is Sal Vaca. Once again, I can respond to that. There is not a recommendation to permanently close the Richmond Public Library. I will note though that in 2 of the 3 scenarios that will be presented to the City Council Tuesday night, there is an item for consideration, which would be reducing some of the services, but it would impact the branch libraries, not the main library. We do anticipate opening up at some point once we have clear guidance from the county on the programming and the services that can be available. But no, there is not a recommendation for the closure of the Richmond Library.
The next question is from Marilyn Wiltz. Could Richmond Library become part of the Contra Costa County's library system? Would that save money and allow library to open?
I'll take that question also. That is a City Council decision. That would be the City Council directing staff to assess a partnership with the county, what that partnership would look like. If we receive that direction, it is staff's responsibility to gather information and provide the City Council with the best information available for them to be able to make a decision or a recommendation whether that option will be explored. But that is a City Council decision.
The next comment is from Susan Worrell. Please fund the pools. The swimming pools are very important to everyone in the city, whether recovering from a surgery, suffering from debilitating arthritis, or needing exercise. Some of us who use walkers and wheelchairs to get around cannot get life-sustaining exercise without a swimming pool. I have heard the stories of increased pain from friends who are swimmers or water walkers during this time that the pools have needed to be closed. I am suffering with knee, back, and other joint pain. It is debilitating, hard to live with. The pool always offers relief and the opportunity for me to increase my strength, lower my infirmity. Kids and adults need to learn to and practice swimming. Richmond has 32 miles of shoreline, more than any other city on the bay. Being able to swim is more than a life skill, it saves lives. We learn to swim in pools. The local swimming pools save our lives in so many ways. We can work together and come up with a plan to open the pools safely, make them accessible safely. I hope we have the opportunity to do this. The Richmond pools are about health and well-being. Please include the pools in the new budget.
Good morning, this is Sal Vaca once again. It's another question for our division. We recognize the great value that pools have in our community and the role they play in sustaining a healthy community. It is our plan to reopen those pools once, again, we receive clear guidance and direction from the county that that is allowed. Again, when we do that, we will be following the spacing, physical spacing requirements, along with hygiene and health requirements. So we are looking forward to the day that we can open the pools. That still is the plan.
Okay, the next questions and comments come from Helen Harris. I am asking you to not close the swimming pools. I, along with many seniors, use the pool for rehabilitation. What if you leave them open 4 days a week, 2 days at the plunge and 2 days at the swim center? Also, what if you ask for volunteers? I worked as a supervisor in the library for over 50 years and would be glad to volunteer 15 hours weekly. You need an outside person to look at all departments and staffing. The last city manager had 20 people, which was a shame. The two departments you should not touch are fire and police.
This is once again, the same answer would respond as the previous one. We are looking forward to when we can open those polls safely.
Okay, the next set of questions involves the Internal Services Department, and this is from Jessica Anguolo. I would like an overview of the 3 buckets described in the City Council this week.
Hi, thanks, Bert. So we have published the potential budget balancing strategies. The detailed document is on the website, so we'll be sure to send that out again. And just again, as I mentioned, we have recommended most of the items from the first bucket, which are the general operating items. And as we work to close the gap, we are looking at other items such as the meet and confer, and then the last resort items as well. Overall, our goal is to preserve services to the best extent possible. So we are really keeping that in the back of our minds as we go through this process. We're looking at everything. We're looking at everything from public safety down to the administrative departments. And we have already received a number of cuts from some of those departments. So we're grateful that departments have come forward as we all are facing this challenge together. So we will be providing those 3 buckets. Again, we'll have the updated version that will be on the website. And then again, we'll be having the proposals that will include items from all 3 of those.
The next question is from Princess Robinson. What nonprofit organizations will be getting funding?
So currently we do provide allocations to the Richmond Arts Center. Also, NIAD is another one. Let's see. Just a moment, I have the listing here.
Oh, do you mind if I jump in?
Okay, go ahead, thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. LaShonda White, I'm Deputy City Manager for Internal Services. The nonprofit organizations that currently have funding in the budget, as Markeisha mentioned, NIAD, the Richmond Arts Center, East Bay Center, as well as Richmond Police Activities League. So those are the 4 that are included in there. What we're trying to determine is if we are able to still fund those organizations, but do it through another funding source, which is the Environmental Community Investment Agreement, ECIA. There is a strategy within the ECIA agreement right now that allows us to provide funding to community-based organizations. Right now, it's through a competitive grant program. So we still have that ongoing, and many nonprofits are able to access that and have been doing that for the past few years. So we're continuing that in the upcoming fiscal year to continue to support our nonprofits. But we're trying to see if we are able to amend the language in the ECIA agreement, which has to go to council, so that we can shift some funding from the general fund to ECIA. Thank you.
Okay, next question is also from Princess Robertson. What is the education budget?
I'm happy to jump in on that one. So I'm not 100% sure if I fully understand the full context of that question. The city doesn't oversee education. That is the West Contra Costa Unified School District. So I feel like there was probably something else in that question that maybe I'm missing, but we don't technically have an education budget. We do try and work really in close collaboration with the school district to make sure that the needs of our Richmond youth are met within the school district. So we have, conversations with various school staff, district staff to meet those needs. There are other ways in which we provide education to the community. We may provide education around environmental health initiatives, or we're doing work around government accountability for race equity. So we're trying to educate the community in various ways, maybe around code enforcement, or how to reduce illegal dumping, excuse me. So there are various ways in which we educate the community. So I'm not sure if you were referring to that, and that's kind of built in to different departments' budgets, or if you were referring to the school district.
The next question comes from Wyatt Pack, and my apologies if I'm saying that name wrong. It's spelled P-T-A-K. What can City of Richmond residents do to help?
I'll jump in again. And somebody else can feel free to answer. Sal, if you want to join in with me. But in terms of what community residents can do to help, number one, stay engaged. Continue to follow us on, at city council meetings, connecting with your departments, the different departments within the city of Richmond, to make sure that you understand what's happening and how you can be supportive to our different departments. We do have a volunteer program that you can connect with, and that's through the community services department, so under Sal Vaca's leadership. And so there are just a variety of ways in which residents can help and support us, but really, to me, it's about staying educated, staying informed. Sal?
Yeah, this is Sal. Happy to weigh in on that. One, thank you for the suggestion, recognizing that because of difficult decisions that we're having to make and the budget impacts, we really need to look at a more robust volunteer program here in the city to ensure that places like our rec centers and our branch libraries continue to be a vital resource for our community. We do have a neighborhood program in place now that solicits volunteers to participate, but that's an area that we'll have to look at more robustly going forward. So thank you for what I take as an offer to assist and participate.
Okay, next question is from Marilyn Wilkes. Given sheltering in place protocols, could volunteers help cover hours so cities' costs are lowered?
The same answer is, yeah, we are definitely open into working with a stronger volunteer model to assist with city services going forward. Recognizing that we'll need to work with nonprofits, our citizens, to identify those opportunities in ways that we can all work together to continue to sustain vitally needed programs.
Okay, the next question and comments come from Catherine Deinst, I believe. Can City Council legally ignore a multi-year structural deficit? The consultant was very clear that we have a long-term structural deficit, and he asked the council for serious changes that will save expenditures for many years. City Council largely ignored this and found less than half of the cuts needed for the 2021 shortfall. Council made no mention of the 100 million deferred maintenance from last year, and they ignored the current economic reality. Chevron is laying off 15%, so not going to contribute revenues in forecast already. Other municipalities, UC/California State, are laying off and making major cuts. And economists are forecasting another lost decade with 25% of temporary layoffs becoming permanent. By 2026, Richmond's shortfall increases almost 5 times and appears to be 140 million. Realistically, it may be worse with the COVID and economic fallout in the progress. So I guess the main question is, can the City Council legally ignore a multi-year structural deficit?
All right, so I can take that one. The 5-year, and LaShonda, feel free to jump in. The 5-year model was an opportunity to present the structural deficit that we're facing, and I think everyone acknowledges that. So it's definitely not being ignored. It's just going to take some time to get there, which is why we are doing forecasting, so that we can proactively address some of those issues down the line that we know are going to happen. It's just not possible in the short term to address the longer term structural deficit. So we are working to do so. And some of the things that we're planning to, or the measures we're planning to implement this fiscal year and also for 2021, are longer term strategies as well, to start looking at long-term fiscal sustainability, and also addressing the structural issue that we have. It's just, the timeline is probably a little bit longer than we'd expected, given the downturn and then also COVID-19. So we are working within the context of fixing our long-term structural deficits.
And just to add in, Markeisha did a really good job of explaining that. I was just going to confirm that we are not ignoring it. Our council is not ignoring the structural deficit. That is why we are presenting information, trying to be transparent, presenting it in a variety of different ways, making sure the information is available, not only to our council, but to our community and to our unions. We need to fix the structural deficit issue. And that's something that we are working on, both looking at revenues and increasing revenues, as well as reducing expenditures. So it's going to take both of those things to get us to a place where we need to be to have a structurally balanced budget that's sustainable and meets the needs of both our employees and our community.
Okay, next question also is from Catherine Dice. There is no way out of the shortfall without major payroll or personnel payroll changes, since this is 3/4 of our budget. Since bankruptcy appears inevitable, can you discuss the process? How are salary and benefits affected? Example, do all health care and retirement benefits on books disappear? And after we get through bankruptcy, can salaries and benefits reset at lower levels, etc.?
Hi, I'll take that question. I appreciate the question and the concern. Right now, we are not looking at bankruptcy, right? We need to fix our issues. We are working really hard to do that. And so because right now we're not talking about bankruptcy, I don't have a really detailed answer for that question. I do appreciate it, though. And we are doing what we need to do, as previously stated, to address our structural needs so that we can have a structurally balanced budget, a sustainable budget, so we don't have to be concerned about bankruptcy. And we are tomorrow night, please tune in to our city council meeting, where we will be presenting some different proposals and options to city council for their consideration. And as Markeisha stated earlier, there's various buckets that we'll be looking at. We've done a lot in the general item bucket, where it's looking at how departments can reduce their expenditures. But buckets 2 and 3, buckets 2 is about accommodations and how we work with our unions. And then bucket 3 is unfortunately looking at, layoffs if that has to happen. And that is we're pulling from that bucket only if we have to. So on tomorrow night, there'll be more information presented to city council. So please stay tuned for that.
Okay, and our last question from Wyatt Pack. Is county side of North Richmond becoming city operated?
I'm happy to take that one also. So the unincorporated portion of North Richmond is not right now being discussed to become incorporated into the city of Richmond. A few years ago, the city of Richmond was looking into that as an option to look at the feasibility. So we hired a consultant to look at some numbers. We went and did a lot of community outreach, and the community came back. Those that wanted to speak out, they came back and were really strong with, they did not want to become part of the city of Richmond. So that idea stopped last year, and we are not pursuing anything in the current fiscal year. However, I do want to say we do work really closely with the county to make sure our services are aligned as much as possible. Our police department works with the sheriff's department. So there is coordination, there is collaboration, and so we will continue to do that.
So we're going to go into the live question and answer session. And please be reminded that you have 1 minute to either pose your question or comment, and we'll try to respond to the best of our ability. And for those that we can't, we will get back to you within the next 3 business days.
We have a comment or question from Mike Parker. You have 1 minute to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Watching council meetings on KCRT is very difficult because it cuts out quite regularly, sometimes the video, sometimes the audio. Also, the presentations that the finance department makes are very hard to read on the KCRT screen because of the resolution. So I'm requesting that the presentations of the finance department be posted online before the council meeting so that we can look at those and follow along during the presentation to the council. Is there any reason that you can't do that?
Thank you, Mr. Parker, for your question or your comment. We will definitely be posting the presentation and the corresponding documents prior to each council meeting. We have committed to doing so. So for tomorrow, you will see the presentation and the accompanying documents posted on the website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Markeisha, can I add to that really quickly? And thank you, Mr. Parker, for the question. So on what we've also committed to do is on the bottom of every single staff report regarding the budget, there is a link which will take you directly to where the information will be posted. So if you upload or download the documents on Thursdays or Fridays once the agenda is posted and you're reviewing what we're doing our best to put all the information in the attached to the agenda items, but information is changing. We're getting additional information. We're trying to make sure our numbers are refined as much as possible before we present to City Council. So there are often times where we do have additional information. So just download the agenda report and you'll see a link there. I just wanted to let everyone know that.
The next question is from Mr. Yendo. You have 1 minute to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, this is Yendo. I am SEIU 10-1 representative representing service workers at City of Richmond, and we are in coalition with fire, police, and also Local 21. Our concern with the budget that is being introduced, we feel like there could be potential cuts to services and also to the workforce that are currently working for the city. And our question is why is the city not looking into the Labor's Coalition recommendation that provides reductions of intangibles and waste of money rather than, reducing the workforce that you currently have? And so my question is, why are we not looking at these important other recommendations that, we've worked so hard to bring forth to you to sort of help you with this?
Markeisha, do you want to start on that one?
So before moving to the meet and confer items that are listed in the budget balancing strategies, we did start with the general items. We have aggressively looked for cost savings in department operating budgets. And that includes every department, including the largest departments. The police department recently provided over $500,000 in cost reductions, and that's outside of vacant positions. We have scrub budgets from the smallest of departments up to the largest, and departments have come forward with areas where they may have to defer things or where there are potential cost savings in current contracts, such as professional services. And so we are starting there. It's just that the deficit is quite large, and it's not possible to not explore other areas that includes or requires the meet and confer process and may have some impacts to labor.
I concur with everything that Markeisha stated, and I do want to, let the unions as well as the public understand and know that we are working really hard to, as we stated in the goals, when Markeisha went over the PowerPoint presentation. Two of the goals is to, maintain service levels and to also not impact employees as much as possible. So we're working really hard to find ways in which we can make sure employees and service levels are maintained as much as possible. So I do want to state that. Any proposals that have come from the unions, we have looked at them. We've had meetings with the unions separately, as well as with the council ad hoc committee members, where we have tried to address all of the unions' ideas and thoughts in terms of how we could reduce the budget. And we're sharing our recommendations and we're having conversations about that. So anytime we get recommendations or ideas, we're taking them, we're really looking at them and seeing how we can, incorporate them to make sure, once again, service levels and employees aren't impacted. But as Markeisha stated, it is very difficult. We have a structural deficit, and so we are doing everything in our power to reduce the budget deficit.
We have another caller, question or comment from Gary Hobart. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Gary Hurlbut, and I run the president of the Richmond Tennis Association. And one of the concerns I had was, I know one of the proposals was suspending all recreation programs for youth and adults through the end of the year. And we've actually been working closely with Tate Kisei and the rec department and looking at other options around, believe it or not, virtual tennis, and actually do some other things to ensure that we have social distancing for some of the other programs. So my hope would be that we can continue to look at some of those alternatives that we can actually, still have cost reductions, but still have some of those programs delivered in alternate ways. And we've also used a lot of the tennis volunteers, for example, that can help out with that. So my hope is rather than just canceling all those, that we actually look at some of those alternative ways to deliver those services, even if they may be reduced.
Yeah, this is Sal Buck. I'll take that. Gary, first of all, thank you for your comment and thank you for all that you and your family do for this community. You are spot on. I know that Ranjana Maharaj and her staff are looking at alternate ways to continue to provide services during these difficult times. And I think that they're doing a fabulous job of working with yourself and other community groups to ensure that there is some programming and services that can be made available to our residents. Thank you.
The next caller is from IBX Fitness. You have 1 minute. Can you hear me? Please begin.
Hi, yeah, this is Ian Burnham from IBX Fitness. I'm one of the co-owners. Related to my earlier question, I just wanted to get a better clarification on if the community center recreation budget cuts would happen for certain, or if they're still being discussed. And we're more than happy to comply with safety and health procedures to make sure we can still operate effectively, but we want to make sure that there's still a physical location for us to hold our programs, provided we follow health and social distance rules.
This is Sal once again, and the plan is to have those centers available for that type of programming and services once we receive the green light from the county that we can move forward in implementing. And I believe you operate out of BTA Center, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to that much needed community center to be open as soon as we get the green light, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll start with the first email question. To clarify, are all strategies 1 through 16 happening for certain, or are they still being discussed?
For the general operating items, 1 through 16, those are very likely to be implemented. They have been, for the first 14, I believe, have been presented to the City Council on May 26th. And then we have some additional ones to add to that list that will go before council tomorrow. Those are all staff recommendations. And it's highly likely that all of those will be implemented.
Okay, the next question is from an anonymous attendee. What direct public services were included in the $15 million decided by the City Council last week?
So there are a number of services. It includes impacts to community services department and a number of others. We'll post the detailed list, or the detailed list is already posted. We'll provide the link to the budget balancing worksheet, and then you can see all of the details from that list.
And from the same anonymous caller, I believe, and how final were those decisions?
They're final in the sense that they have been approved, and again, we'll be taking additional ones that were added to the list tomorrow. And so City Council will approve those, and from there, we'll implement them in the budget.
The next question is from Alex Knox. What are the top non-benefits related expenses that are part of the increase between the current and next fiscal year?
For non-benefit increases, the budget currently includes the IT replacement of $4.3 million. It also includes vehicle replacement at the higher cost from when we started the budget process. So those are the largest variances. Everything else, as far as department operating budgets, are pretty much status quo. It should also be noted that we did move some functions from other funds over to the general fund, but there's a net zero impact because revenues carried over with those. So for example, the CAD dispatch system and RMS were moved from telecommunications funds to the general fund, and then also engineering cost recovery was moved from the cost recovery fund over to the general fund. Again, it was a zero net impact because the city does not have to do transfers out to those funds to balance them. So those were the main increases from this year to next year.
I'm going to go to a question directly for Sal Vaca from Jane Corrent. Have you conferred with other city library directors in the Bay Area about how they are coping with the city's deficits? Unlike in Richmond, these directors are experienced librarians who have dealt with budget cuts throughout their careers.
Yes, this is Sal, and thank you for the question. I have had conversations with the county librarian in regards to operations and processes. And there have been some discussions about how they're approaching this. So those discussions have taken place and will continue to take place, and really reaching out to our neighboring partners to see how they are dealing with the challenges that are not unique to Richmond. So the answer is yes.
Okay, I'm gonna take the next few questions from Yendo. County library partnership with the county. What does that look like? Why not work with the workers Richmond has? And her comment is, it makes any sense to cut current staff to contract out. It makes no sense. Sal, could you please answer the question about the county library partnership?
I think the question's premature. Our plan is to continue to operate our main library here in the city of Richmond, while we do explore ways that we can have a more efficient and effective process in place. But at this point, the plan moving forward is to continue to operate our main library.
I'm going to go to another anonymous attendee. Has the city considered voluntary furloughs? The meet and confer items only refer to furloughs across the board. However, there may be staff willing and wanting to furlough for additional days. For example, they may want to be physically present with their children and they just adjust to distant learning. As they adjust to distant learning, the voluntary furlough practice has been instituted in some cities across the country.
Hi, I can take that. We are looking at everything. So we actually are doing research on what a voluntary furlough program could look like. So thank you for that recommendation, just in case we weren't looking at it, but we are.
Okay, I'm gonna take another question here from Catherine and Howard. Can you clarify why pension costs historically increased even when FTE personnel was reduced from 800 to 700?
I can take that one, Markeisha. So the PERS benefits are based on annual actuarial studies that are done and provided to public agencies. They specify the amount of the cost that we need to remit on an annual basis based on the number of actuarial assumptions. Now for the funds that do go into the system, they are invested. And about 3 to 4 years ago, the return on investment that was projected by PERS was actually a few percentage points lower than what was expected. And the fallout ended up impacting public agencies. And so it has started to smooth out, but agencies are still paying for that, the error in the projections there. So the cost for PERS continues to increase for a number of reasons. But for the most part, over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen a significant increase due to the return on investment being lower than projected. And then also from them moving from a 30-year amortization to a 20-year amortization, that increases the cost as well. So it is naturally going to increase, but again, there were some other impacts that caused that to increase at a greater magnitude than expected.
Hi, Mr. Parker. Do you have another question?
Yeah, no, this is a continuation of the previous question. I just double checked, and the presentation that the finance department will make at the city council meeting tomorrow is not online, either in the finance department's webpage or on the agenda documents webpage. All that's there is that I can find is just that there's going to be more discussion of bucket 2 and bucket 3 with no mention as to what specific things. Apparently you're promoting, you're going to provide for, ask for closing some library branch activities from what I gather from some of the answers today. The other thing that I want to ask, so I would like to ask again that this presentation that you're going to make tomorrow, what you're asking for, be put online in advance of the council meeting rather than that we see it only at the first time in an unreadable form at the council meeting. The other thing, if I may ask, is in the meet and confer with bargaining units, is the city proposing a progressive scale of cuts rather than across the board cuts? That is, no cuts for people under 70, make under 70,000, and large cuts for people who make, you know, 100,000 to 200 and 300,000 in the city. So there's two questions.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, for the follow-up question and for your new question. For the first one, the PowerPoint presentation is not finalized yet, which is why you don't see it uploaded yet. We haven't sent anything to council. We are still working on it. And so the moment we send it to council, it will be placed on the website. So it's not up yet because it's not done yet. So that's one, but we will make sure. Oftentimes it may be later today, right before the council meeting, you know, the Monday before the council meeting, or on Tuesday. We're doing our best to get things out well, you know, in advance of that. But we're trying to make sure things are, the numbers are as refined as possible. Your second question around accommodations and the conversations we're going to be having with unions, those are things that, you know, we will have conversations with behind closed doors with our unions. And so in terms of strategy and what unions are going to be proposing and what the city is proposing, that's not something we can discuss on this call. I do thank you for your ideas, but these are conversations that city staff as well as union representatives will be having behind closed doors. Thank you.
Please continue to use the email. We will keep that email open and available, and we'll be monitoring and responding as we receive questions. We'll try to do them as quickly as possible, but we're also trying to work to balance the budget. So we'll try to be as responsive as we can. So continue to use that. And just to sum everything up, we ask that you continue to engage with us and utilize the resources to stay informed. And of course, if you have any ideas, suggestions, questions, you can send them to the email. We're open to any suggestions that you all may have as we work together to close the budget gap. And we just want to keep in mind that ultimately our goals are to achieve a structurally balanced budget over time, and to also maintain long-term fiscal sustainability for the city of Richmond. So thanks again for joining us. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.